Hello and thank you so much for tuning in. So today I'm going to be talking about bronzers and specifically two that I recently picked up, both of which I don't think are going to work for me. So we're off to a great start already. So the two bronzers I'm going to be talking about are the Cover FX Monochromatic Bronzer Duo in the shade Suntan Bronze and the MAC and Aladdin Powder Blush in the shade Your Wish Is My Command. So this is what the two bronzers look like on the inside, and I have actually played around with both of these. And perhaps if you've been in a situation where you're shopping for a bronzer that was maybe borderline too light for your skin tone, you can relate. But it was one of those moments where I put both of these on and I was just like, is it there? Because I feel like I maybe can kind of see something, but I can't really tell. At which point it's probably time to admit that that bronzer is just not going to work for you. But I wanted to give these another chance, and that day that I tried these out, I was just probably wearing one of my regular foundations or one of my deeper toned foundations. So today I decided to bring in the lightest foundation that I have in my collection that I still, feel comfortable wearing on its own. And I'm hoping that that is going to give these the best chance to succeed and show up on my skin, because if they don't do that for me today on this foundation, then there's just nothing else that I could possibly do to make these work for me. In addition to applying these to see if they show up on my skin, I will have some interesting commentary on both of these shades, which might be a little bit surprising, even if these don't work out for me. So if you're interested in hearing what I have to say about that, then stay tuned. So the foundation that I'm wearing today for these bronzers, hopefully in an effort to get them to show up, is the Clinique Even Better Makeup, and this is in the shade Golden 114. Now this is a lighter coverage foundation as well, so that's why I feel like it doesn't throw things too terribly off on me. And it actually probably looks fine on me now, and it does. The thing is, it actually does kind of match my chest. The problem is, I personally am not used to seeing my face match my chest because my face is different, like multiple different skin tones. I'm different skin tones like all over my body, like the inside of my wrist is like a completely different color. So I know that in makeup the whole thing is about match your face to your chest. How about match your face to your face, So that's why this foundation to me, like, it looks a little bit off, but it is lighter coverage, so I feel like it doesn't look too off in my opinion. Okay, so I've got two different brushes that I'm going to be using to apply these bronzers. I know these are not the same brush, but I tried to pick two brushes out of my collection that were similar in the density, and these are both that, and they're both brushes that I do really enjoy applying bronzer with. So if the bronzers don't apply well with these, then I don't think that they would have a chance with anything else. This is a Coastal Scents brush, and unfortunately it doesn't have like a name on it. It just has like a bunch of random letters and numbers. If BR-C-N25 means anything, that's what this brush is classified as. And then this is one of the Wet n Wild brushes from one of their holiday sets, which these brushes are actually really nice. And this one's a really nice brush too. This one I've had for quite some time. So I am going to use both of these to apply the two bronzers that I have. So before I put them on my face, I thought it would be good if I went ahead and swatched them so you can get an idea of what they look like. And if you remember what they looked like when I held them up, you would have noticed that in the pan, the MAC blush actually looks a little bit lighter than the Cover FX blush, or the Cover FX bronzer, excuse me. But you'll see that these swatch differently. So this is the MAC bronzer that I'm swatching right now, and I'm kind of like also rubbing my finger across it, which I noticed that with a lot of like powder products, when you do that, sometimes they will have a tendency to kind of get darker. So I mean, that looks promising on the back of my hand, but you also have to remember that, again, back of my hand is a different skin tone than my face, so that doesn't really mean too much. And then the Cover FX one is right underneath. So you see how much lighter that is? I mean, you can't even see it. It just like blended right into my hand, which doesn't bode well for me because, again, my hand is lighter than my face. So if it's not even showing up on my hand, then Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and swatch these on the lower part of my arm as well, because my arm does get darker. So here they are on the lower part of my arm, which is slightly darker. This again is the MAC blush up first, see, I keep calling it a blush because it is labeled as a blush, but it's actually it's a bronzer. So that's the MAC bronzer, and then here is the here's the Cover FX one. So, I mean, you can see both of them. The MAC one looks so promising to me. So hopefully I can at least get that one to show up. So we'll see what happens. Because I have the most faith in the MAC one, I'm going to go ahead and apply that one first. So I'm going to use the Coastal Scents brush that I have, and I'll apply it to this side of my face. I probably should have gotten a mirror because this mirror is just kind of too small for me to do my makeup with. I see something. That actually showed up a little bit. Okay, let me go back into it. Okay, well, it's kind of showing up. Let me build it up once more. Kind of bring it up onto the cheeks a little bit this time. This is one of those things where I honestly feel like it's possible that it might be showing up a little bit better on camera than it is in real life, but again, I feel like it's still a moment for me where I'm like, I can kind of see it, but it's very, very, very subtle, you know? So, well, doesn't bode well for the Cover FX one now, does it? Also, I realized I didn't quite show what my cheek looked like before I put the bronzer on. I don't have anything on my cheek other than, of course, the foundation, but this is what the bare side of my cheek looks like. And I'm gonna go ahead and go in with that Cover FX. This Cover FX bronzer is also like really, really powdery. Like Anastasia Beverly Hills eyeshadow levels of powdery, which is kind of troublesome for a bronzing product. Oh my gosh, see? It's so powdery. But I do see it for what it's worth. There's definitely a reddish stripe on my face currently. All right, I'm going to try to build that up a little bit more. I can actually see that, like in real life and also on camera. It actually looks like I went a little too ham with it on camera because, like I said, this bronzer is super, super powdery. That's very interesting. Interesting indeed. But again, I feel like these have really shown up the most now that I am using a foundation that is lighter. And to be fair, I do really like this foundation, the Clinique foundation, and it's one that I wear pretty regularly. It's actually one of my go-to like everyday staple foundations. So I do tend to mix it in with something else typically, but I don't mind wearing it on its own. Wow, that Cover FX side, I'm just, you know, it's like when you sit down to film something or to show somebody something and you swear it's going to turn out one way and then it turns out completely the opposite way. So I'm still gonna get my commentary on it and I'm still gonna say what I wanted to say because I still feel a certain way about both of these releases. So let's go ahead and discuss those things. So the MAC bronzer, again marketed as a powder blush from the Aladdin collection, is actually surprisingly still available, like literally everywhere. You can get it at MAC, you can get it at Macy's, Belk, Bloomingdale's, Dillard's, Saks Fifth Avenue, anywhere that sells MAC, they still have this, except for Ulta. But that's because Ulta moves stuff out with the quickness now. I've noticed that. You know, I used to be really excited that they were bringing in a lot more brands, but what I've noticed is what they're doing is they're pushing out like established brands that they have been carrying in their store for years. And even the brands that they are still carrying, they are cutting the amount of products that they carry, which is a bummer because there are certain products that I used to buy from them all the time that I can't get from them anymore because they're like, listen, we don't have enough space for that. It's gotta go. So, but you can still get this bronzer pretty much anywhere else that sells MAC. So with this bronzer, I have to say that I'm actually really happy that MAC decided to come out with a color this deep. And again, I know it's still maybe a little bit questionable if it showed up on my skin or if it showed up on my skin in a flattering way. It almost maybe looks like it could be running a little bit cooler if it is showing up I think it's showing up. Something's showing up, but it looks a little questionable. It looks a little shadowy. But I am really happy that MAC came out with a bronzer this deep, because in the past MAC had done these limited edition collections and they came out with bronzers that could only suit a light to medium skin tone. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the bronzers that were available in past MAC limited edition collections were the same shade of bronzer. And I'm especially happy that they came out with a deeper variety of bronzer in this collection, because we are talking about Aladdin here, we're talking about Princess Jasmine, we're talking about a character, a fictional character, but a character nonetheless who has a lot more melanin in their skin. And so the fact that MAC at least had the common sense to come out with a product that would suit somebody in that fictional universe is really hopefully a good sign for the future, because I think that MAC overall with the rest of their line have done a good job at being pretty inclusive. They've always carried a really broad foundation range, and I even think that their selection of color cosmetics, like their lipsticks and even their eyeshadows, have always they've always kind of had darker skin tones in mind. And that's something that people don't necessarily think about. You know, that me as a darker skin person, like I have a lot of trouble, for example, finding blushes, and MAC has an amazing range of blushes. So I appreciate that about MAC, and it does make sense because MAC is a brand that kind of focuses on makeup artists, so it should carry a good range of things. However, the one area that MAC has always seemed to kind of fail or fall flat is whenever they do a bronzer with a limited edition collection. Now, I'm still surprised that to this day MAC hasn't released a bronzer of their own. I don't know what that's about. I don't know if maybe it's a thing with like makeup artists not using bronzer, and so MAC doesn't feel the need to come up with a bronzer. I don't know. I have no idea, but it just seems a little bit weird that with bronzers being, you know, very popular, at least for the past few years, that they haven't come out with like a permanent mainstay type of bronzer. So it seems like they're just going to continue to do these types of products in limited edition collections. But again, at least they did one that made sense, because I don't know if you guys remember, but a couple of years ago, MAC did a collection for Aaliyah in honor of Aaliyah, the singer. And I don't know if you knew this, but Aaliyah was black. And MAC came out with this really confusing bronzer because it definitely would not have suited Aaliyah's skin tone. So it's like you did this collection, you know, that was supposed to kind of posthumously honor this person, and the collection doesn't even actually suit them. And I know people talked about it more generally too, because the colors seem to be kind of bland compared to the style of makeup that Aaliyah wore, because during her time she was kind of a trendsetter when it came to the types of clothing she was wearing and her makeup, and the collection overall just seemed very blah. But the bronzer is really what gets me, because it's like you didn't even think to come out with a bronzer that made sense. So at the very least, I know that this bronzer will work on people who have tan complexions. I know I've seen Kelsey Brianna J use this, so I know that there are people with tan complexions that this bronzer will work for. So that makes me happy, and even though it doesn't work for me, again, I'm glad that MAC had the common sense to come out with a product that made sense for the collection that they were doing. So now to talk about the Cover FX bronzer, which does actually show up on me, but I have a little bit more of a scathing criticism to offer to Cover FX than I do to MAC. For MAC, I feel like, you know, if they're gonna come out with this limited edition collection and only come out with one bronzer, it made sense for them to come out with the bronzer that they came out with. Like I said, even though it doesn't necessarily suit me, the important thing is it suited people that it made sense to suit, if that makes sense. Cover FX came out with this product, which is a permanent product in their line, and they also came out with these corresponding blushes as well. Now the blushes came in 6 shades, and it seemed like with that, the 2 lightest shades seemed to be really suitable for probably like, you know, fair, light skin tones. The middle 2 seemed like they would suit medium, light, medium skin tones. And then the last 2 seemed like they would be good for, you know, maybe tan to dark skin tones. So there was a little bit more thought in the blushes. I would love to see them do more colors in those, but there seemed to be a little bit more thought with the colors that they came out with the blushes. The bronzers, however, these only came in 2 varieties. So I have, like I said, Suntan Bronze. This is the darkest variety, and as you can see, it just ever so slightly showed up on me. And again, that's with me wearing the lightest foundation that I have in my collection. So I'm disappointed in that. I really am disappointed in that, because I think Cover FX tends to do a really good job with their complexion products in terms of the shades, and even the way that they set the shades up, because I feel like a lot of brands don't necessarily take the care to, you know, organize their shades in the most logical way. So for example, if you're a golden undertone, it might take you a while to kind of pinpoint the shades that are kind of a golden undertone. And then sometimes I find that brands will even mislabel shades, or I don't agree with the labels that they put on certain shades that they have in their collection. So I think Cover FX actually does a good job of that. Their Powerplay Concealer, I absolutely love it, and I own it in the shades G Deep 2 and G Deep 3, which are literally half shades apart from each other, but they both still have the exact same golden undertone, and that is so impressive. I've never seen two colors that are, you know, right next to each other that are supposed to have the same undertone that really followed the, okay, so if this is number 2, then number 3 is going to look exactly the same, but just ever so slightly darker. Like, they nailed that to a T. So the fact that they can do so well with their complexion products, but then the bronzer only came in 2 varieties, is a little bit disappointing. And I actually saw that they are discontinuing, I guess, the original bronzer that they used to carry, which I never picked that up, but I know that that came in 3 shades. And the 3 shades that it came in were called Sun-Kissed, Suntan, and Sunset. So Sun-Kissed Bronze is actually the other duo of products that's available in this bronzer line. So my assumption is that the bronzers that they're about to discontinue are probably the same as, if not similar to, these bronzers that are in these duos, because the names are identical. But if that was the case, then why couldn't they have given us a Sunset bronzer duo? Also, there's the fact that I don't feel like the shimmer product in this makes any sense, because this is actually a sort of like highlighting shade, but honestly it's borderline too deep for me to use as a highlighter, and I'll go ahead and swatch this product as well since I have this out. But yeah, this is actually a pretty dark product on me. I mean, I can make it work for myself, but the, you know, probably tan complected people that are wearing this bronzer duo probably have very little use for this shade. And I mean, maybe Cover FX meant this to be kind of like a shimmery bronzer. I mean, they do call it the matte and shimmer bronzer duo. So, but like, who's wearing something that has like this amount of like shine as a bronzer? Honestly, nobody. So really, this makes sense for a much deeper skin tone, and this, on the other hand, makes sense for somebody of a lighter complexion. So I don't really get it. I don't really get it, and I hope that Cover FX does come out with more shades soon, although it would have been nice to see them have more shades from the start. That being said, if you're around my complexion, then I do think that this bronzer does show up on you just ever so slightly. And I do leave my foundation matches listed in the description box, but again, keep in mind that the foundations that I like are typically a little bit darker than what I have on right now. I will say though, like I said, this is Clinique Golden, and the other foundation that I have in my collection that is quite light on me is NARS Sheer Glow in Macao. So if you're that color, that, you know, this bronzer probably would work on you. Oh, and then also the Estee Lauder Double Wear in the shade 6W1 Sandalwood. Any of those shades I think would work with this bronzer in the same way that it's kind of worked with my skin tone. So those are my thoughts. I hope that this video was at least somewhat enjoyable, if not a little bit ranty. But yeah, I honestly hope that the next wave of inclusivity really needs to be talking about what are we gonna do about these bronzers, what are we gonna do about these blushes, these lipsticks, these eyeshadows, because I still feel like a lot of companies are totally missing the mark when it comes to other types of cosmetic products, particularly color cosmetics. You know, what good is it if you have 50 foundations and 40 concealers, but then I can't even find, you know, a blush that works in your lineup, or a bronzer for that matter. So that wraps up this video. If you liked it, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for like content. But either way, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.